you know, when we humans set out to build, like, something genuinely complex, a skyscraper or a massive suspension bridge, the process is, well, it's agonizing.
Oh, absolutely. It takes years of planning.
Right. We rely on massive software models and armies of structural engineers arguing over every fraction of an inch, blueprints that weigh as much as a small car.
Yeah, the logistics alone are terrifying.
Exactly. We expect absolute precision, and the margin for error is essentially zero. But even then, I mean, we build, we test, we find flaws, we rebuild. It's this constant, messy struggle against gravity and materials.
A very human struggle.
But then you look out the window at the natural world. You look at a spider web, a bird's nest, or a beehive. There are no blueprints. There's no foreman yelling about load-bearing walls or supply chain issues.
No project managers in the animal kingdom?
Right. The architecture is just perfectly constructed, flawless, right from day one. And today, we're taking a deep dive into a text that claims this natural perfection isn't, the messy result of millions of years of evolution. It argues that it is a deliberate, divine software update.
It's a massive shift in perspective, really, because we usually like to think of humans as the ultimate master builders,
Yeah.
right? The pinnacle of intelligence.
Yeah, we give ourselves a lot of credit.
We do. But the source material we're examining today forces us to confront the fact that nature has been executing flawless structural engineering since long before we even figured out how to, sharpen stones.
So true.
We're looking at translated excerpts from a highly provocative text. It's titled, "There is a Supernatural Soul in the Universe, 40 Evidence Proving the Existence of the Greatest Creator." It's written by Shefeng, with translation editing by Komlong and Alien.
And the overarching premise here isn't just, isn't nature pretty? The author introduces this philosophical framework, a concept of studying in what they call Lifechanyuan. Now, I have to admit, I was a little tripped up by this at first. Like, is this a physical place or a religion?
Yeah, that's a common initial reaction. It's best understood as a conceptual space, or really a state of mind.
Yeah.
The text suggests that by studying in Lifechanyuan, by looking really closely and calmly at the universe's mechanics, your spirituality grows. It grows to the point where your thinking can actually transcend standard human nature and even standard human ethics.
Wow, transcend human ethics. That's a huge claim.
It is. The core foundation of this text is that there's a supernatural power, a super wisdom that completely controls the movement of the universe, the birth and death of all things, even human fate.
Right.
It argues that by truly observing nature, you can see the literal fingerprints of what it calls the greatest creator.
And the author doesn't just make this grand, sweeping claim and expect us to take it on blind faith. They present 40 specific pieces of evidence.
Very specific.
Yeah. And we are taking a deep dive into 2 of these today, specifically looking at bees and chickens.
Which sounds completely mundane on the surface.
Right, bees and chickens. But we're going to see how the author uses entirely everyday, observable phenomena to systematically argue against the theory of evolution. So, okay, let's unpack the first major argument here.
Let's do it.
To prove the existence of this super wisdom, the text starts with this incredibly vivid thought experiment. And I actually want to pose this directly to you listening right now. Imagine you are tasked with building several hundred temporary houses.
But there are very intense, very specific constraints on this construction project.
Oh, yeah. Nightmare constraints. Each house only needs to hold one person, and that person is completely incapable of any activity.
Think of it like a hibernation pod.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A pod. Now, you have to build these hundreds of adjoining pods using the absolute minimum amount of material.
Yeah.
And you have to use the least amount of labor to construct them.
Right, maximum efficiency.
But wait, there's more. They must have the strongest possible overall structure. They need the greatest interior volume, pick in it, the cubage for the person inside. And just to make it a total nightmare for the architect, the final structure has to look incredibly beautiful.
It is essentially the ultimate multivariable optimization problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you handed that exact prompt to a modern architectural firm today, it would take a team of people months just to model the most efficient shape on a computer.
I was actually trying to solve this in my head while reading. And my first thought, and I think a lot of people's first thought, is just,
A cube.
yeah, cube. I mean, we live in cubes. We ship things in cardboard boxes because they stack perfectly next to each other. Why wouldn't adjoining cubes be the easiest and most efficient answer?
Well, they do stack perfectly, yes. But think about the payload. You are designing this for a human body. Are human bodies shaped like cubes?
Well, no. Not usually.
Exactly. We have shoulders, waists, varying leg sizes. If you put a human body in a rigid cube, all four corners of that space are just dead air.
Oh, right. The body isn't using it.
Right. And in the strict parameters of this thought experiment, dead space means you built walls you didn't need to build. Wasted space equals wasted material, which equals wasted labor.
That makes sense.
Plus, the author subjectively argues that a giant grid of stacked cubes just doesn't meet the beautiful criteria.
Fair enough. Cubes are ugly. So cubes are out. What about, like, cylinders? Just slide everyone into a tube and stack the tubes like logs.
Cylinders fail the structural test.
How so?
If you stack a bunch of cylinders together, there's barely any contact area between them. They only touch at a single tangential line along the curve.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that tiny line of contact is absolutely not strong enough to serve as a shared load-bearing wall between two adjacent rooms.
You'd have to fill the gaps between the tubes.
Exactly. You'd have to fill them with extra material, which completely violates the rule about using the minimum amount of resources.
Okay. What about adjoining octahedrons? Think of, like, a 20-sided die used in tabletop games, just stacked endlessly together.
Now you're failing the labor constraint.
Because it's too complicated.
Way too complicated. The geometry is incredibly complex. Every additional facet you add to a structure means another joint to seal, another angle to measure, another plane to construct.
Right.
The more sides a shape has, the more time-consuming and difficult it is to physically build.
Okay, so we've ruled out cubes, cylinders, complex polygons, and obviously random irregular shapes because those wouldn't align at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the author uses this process of elimination to lead us to the actual answer. The perfect, most mathematically flawless solution to this riddle is the bee's honeycomb, which is built entirely out of hexagonal columns.
But the author doesn't just stop at hexagons are great. They actually take us into the deep, mind-bending geometry of the honeycomb's base. And this is where it gets highly technical.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
Because a bee larva is not a perfect uniform cylinder. Its lower and middle parts differ in size. So the bottom of the honeycomb cell cannot just be a flat floor.
Wait, why not? I mean, a flat floor seems like the absolute easiest thing to build. You just cap the bottom of the hexagon.
It is easier to build, but remember the constraint. Absolute maximum volume with absolute minimum material.
Oh, right. The dead space rule again.
Exactly. A flat floor leaves dead space around the tapered end of the larva. So the bees don't build a flat floor. They cap the bottom of the hexagonal tube with 3 congruent rhombuses.
Rhombuses, like diamonds.
Yeah, a rhombus is basically a pushed-over square, like a diamond shape. By angling 3 of these diamond shapes together, they create a kind of inverted, 3-dimensional vault or pyramid at the bottom of the cell.
Okay, so it's like a faceted, sunken floor that perfectly cradles the exact shape of the larva.
Perfectly.
That's clever. But the text goes further, right? It brings in this staggering piece of historical mathematics to prove just how perfect this shape really is.
Yeah, this is where the philosophy is suddenly backed by hard, observable numbers. The text details how back in 1712, an astronomer named G.F. Maraldi at the Paris Observatory became obsessed with this.
An astronomer studying bees?
Yep. He meticulously measured the angles of these tiny wax rhombuses at the bottom of the honeycomb, and what he found was shockingly consistent.
What did he find?
Across the board, the obtuse angle, the wider angle of the diamond, was exactly 109.28 degrees.
Okay.
And the acute angle, the sharper point, was exactly 70.32 degrees.
109.28 and 70.32. I mean, that doesn't sound like organic nature. That sounds like a coordinate or like a combination lock. Why those exact numbers?
That's the exact question a French scientist had a little later on. He took this structural problem to a Swiss mathematician. He essentially posed the author's thought experiment, but purely as a math equation.
No bees mentioned.
Right. And before computers existed, he asked, what is the absolute most economical way calculating for maximum possible volume and minimum possible surface area to construct a hexagonal column capped with 3 congruent rhombuses?
And this mathematician had to calculate the multivariable calculus by hand.
Completely by hand. And the result the mathematician produced.
Yeah.
To achieve absolute maximum efficiency, the obtuse angle must be exactly 109.28 degrees, and the acute angle must be exactly 70.32 degrees.
Wait, really? That is genuinely staggering.
It's exact.
So the mathematician spent months calculating the absolute pinnacle of structural efficiency and arrived at the exact same numbers that bees have been building with beeswax in the dark, using their own bodies, for millions of years.
Millions of years before humans even invented the concept of a geometric degree. It's a phenomenal reality.
That's insane.
For humans, only the most elite mathematical minds could work out that specific formula. Yet an ordinary worker bee executes it flawlessly, millions of times a day, without ever taking a geometry class.
But the author pivots here. And this caught me totally off guard. They use this mathematical marvel to make a really sharp social commentary.
Oh, the communism part.
Yes. The text asks this really pointed question.
Yeah.
If bees possess this superintelligence, if they are so much wiser than us that they solved this calculus problem eons ago, why are they at the bottom of the food chain?
The contrast the author draws here is deliberate and stark. The text points out that bees toil endlessly, gathering honey from hundreds of different flowers. They practice what the author cheekily calls an unselfish communism style.
Right, working entirely for the collective.
Exactly. And their reward, they are heavily exploited by humans. We just walk up in protective suits and steal the fruits of their genius.
Yeah, we just take it.
And humans, by contrast, are described by the author as selfish, reluctant to share, and constantly calculating how to encroach on other people's property.
I have to admit, my immediate reaction to reading that was, well, yeah, that's just the food chain, right? Humans are bigger, we have tools, we exploit smaller creatures.
Right, the standard view.
But the author is making a much deeper point about the mechanics of evolution itself here, aren't they?
Exactly. The author is using this dynamic as a literal weapon against the theory of natural selection.
How so?
The argument goes like this. If evolution is a constant upward trajectory, where superior intelligence and adaptation lead to dominance, then why didn't the bee, which possessed superior mathematical and architectural intelligence long before human birth, evolve to dominate us?
Wow.
Why did this hyper-intelligent species stay stagnant as exploited workers while messy, mathematically inferior humans took over the planet?
And to really hammer this home, the author brings in Charles Darwin himself.
Yes, the ultimate irony.
The text quotes Darwin expressing total bafflement over the honeycomb. Darwin is quoted as saying, let me find it, "Natural selection is powerless to explain such a perfect structure of the honeycomb because as we see it, either in terms of labor or the use of beeswax, the honeycomb conforms to the theory of maximum economy and is absolutely perfect."
Now, it's really important to look at how the author is wielding that quote. They are taking the founder of evolutionary theory's own admission of the honeycomb's unexplainable perfection and making it the linchpin of their argument.
Because, if we think about evolution, evolution is messy.
Very messy.
It relies on random mutation. It's a long, brutal process of trial and error. It produces things that are good enough to survive, not things that are mathematically perfect from their absolute inception.
Precisely. If this 109.28 degree wisdom didn't evolve gradually, and we logically know that worker bees aren't consciously solving calculus equations while they gather pollen, where does this wisdom come from?
Right.
The text provides one definitive answer: instinct.
But I need to stop right here. Because the author uses the word instinct, but they define it in a way that completely breaks from modern biology.
It's a very specific definition.
Yeah, when I hear instinct, I think of like a biological drive wired into our neurology over millions of years. But the author defines it totally differently.
The text strips it down to a very rebellious definition. They define instinct simply as the capability possessed after birth.
Just that simple.
But the massive philosophical leap they make is that this innate, flawless capability fundamentally contradicts the theory of evolution.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The author argues that if a capability is perfectly pre-installed, it didn't need millions of years of mistakes to refine itself. Therefore, things do not develop gradually.
It's essentially arguing that the perfectly calibrated angles of the honeycomb were designed by a super wisdom, a greatest creator, and then just downloaded into the bee.
Like firmware.
Yeah. The bee is running a flawless software program. The instinct is an evolution. It's a divine inheritance.
Which is a perfect transition into the next phenomenon the author dissects.
Right.
Because if the honeycomb shows us the collective mathematical programming of an entire hive working together, you could argue that's just a hive mind at work.
Sure. Emergent behavior.
So what happens when you remove the hive entirely? What happens when a creature is completely isolated?
And that brings us to the second example from the text. Evidence 29. The chick hatching from its eggshell.
This one is fascinating.
We are moving from collective geometry to biological, totally isolated programming. We're looking at a 21-day timeline. A hen sits on an egg. Inside, in utter darkness, a liquid mix of yolk and egg white transforms into a fully formed living creature with bones, blood, and feathers.
The paramount detail here is the absolute isolation.
Yeah.
The unhatched chick has zero contact with the outside world. No sensory input, no communication.
And the author uses this really unexpected, almost absurd analogy to drive home the point about isolation and teaching.
Oh, the rooster analogy.
Yes. The text describes the rooster, the father, as spending all day just trying to seduce hens. It says he doesn't care at all about chores or educating his offspring.
So specific.
The author writes that if the mother hen complains, the rooster just brushes her off, saying, "Who knows if I am the father? Last month I saw you fooling around with the neighbor's rooster."
It's a very bizarre, almost daytime soap opera anthropomorphism to find in a serious theological text.
It is. I was literally laughing while reading it. But then I realized the author is using this funny, dramatic scenario to make an incredibly rigorous point about the transmission of survival knowledge. Because what the joke is actually establishing is that the rooster is completely absent.
Exactly. The humor masks a profound philosophical barrier. The rooster isn't holding seminars outside the egg to teach the chick how to break out. He's not tapping on the shell transmitting Morse code instructions.
Yo.
So the father isn't the teacher. What about the mother hen? Did she teach the chick?
The text argues logically that she couldn't have. Because if the mother hen possessed the conscious awareness that the chick needed to break the shell to survive, and she knew the mechanics of how it was done, she would just break it open from the outside.
It makes total sense.
It would be exponentially easier for a fully grown bird to crack a shell than for a fragile unborn chick to do it from the inside.
So we have established that no one is teaching the chick. The chick is completely alone in the dark. And this is where the text introduces the paradox of the eggshell.
This part is brilliant.
It asks us to deeply consider the physical reality of a newly formed creature inside an egg. How does this chick even know that a world exists outside of its dark, cramped space?
Right.
And more importantly, how does it know that its soft, newly formed little beak is the exact, specific tool required to peck through a calcium wall?
To understand how crazy this is, we have to look at the shell itself.
Yeah.
The author points out that the eggshell is an absolute engineering marvel.
Truly.
Think of the eggshell like an architectural arch. From the outside, the mother hen's weight presses down on it. The curved structure distributes that weight perfectly, making it incredibly strong. Strong enough not to be crushed by a full-grown bird sitting on it.
But the paradox is that it is simultaneously weak enough to be destroyed.
Yes.
It is exactly thin enough that a baby bird, a creature with virtually zero muscle mass who has never taken a breath of outside air, can shatter it with a single tap from the inside.
Wow.
It's a structural masterpiece where the chick is handed the exact key to a one-way lock.
And again, the author returns to their core answer. Instinct.
Always back to instinct.
The chick doesn't possess conscious awareness of the farmyard outside or the tensile strength of its own beak. When the 21 days are up, it just pecks. It is compelled by a pre-installed, flawless program.
But the author pushes this even further. This is where the argument against evolution reaches its grand finale. The text synthesizes all of this by forcing us to think about the ultimate origin point, the very first chicken.
Yes. This part actually made me stop reading and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It's a heavy thought.
The author argues that because this instinct is perfectly formed and innate, it means the very first chick, hatching from the very first egg ever laid on Earth, already possessed this exact knowledge.
It had to.
It already knew exactly how to peck its way out without any prior genetic information to inherit.
Because there were no prior chickens. By the author's strict logic, a gradual evolutionary process simply does not work for the eggshell problem. Let's assume evolution is trial and error. If the very first eggshell was too thick, or if the very first chick didn't instinctively know how to break out, the chick dies inside the shell.
End of story.
The species ends at generation 1. There is no second generation to pass a slightly better breaking technique down to.
The margin of error is 0.
Precisely 0. Therefore, the author concludes, the instinct had to be perfectly formed and present from day 1. It could not have evolved. It had to be designed.
Which points directly, again, to the super wisdom, to the greatest creator.
It is the ultimate locked room mystery, and the chick is born with the exact solution perfectly memorized before it even has eyes to see the room.
So if we step back and look at the journey this text has taken us on, what does this all mean? The philosophy of Lifechanyuan is challenging us to completely alter the lens through which we view reality. It asks us to look at the instincts of nature, whether it's a bee calculating an obtuse angle of exactly 109.28 degrees to save beeswax, or an isolated chick executing a perfectly timed breakout from a structural arch, and stop seeing them as the lucky, messy results of millions of years of random natural selection.
It frames the natural world not as a chaotic work in progress, but as a finished, deliberate masterpiece. It argues that these creatures are functioning exactly as they were perfectly designed to by a greatest creator.
It takes the idea of the architectural blueprint we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive and says the blueprint absolutely exists. It's flawless. We just aren't the ones who drew it.
It really is a profound reframing of biology into theology, but, it raises an incredibly important question. And it's a thought I want to leave you, the listener, to ponder today.
Oh, I like this.
The text builds a highly compelling thought experiment around the animal kingdom. If we look closely at the natural world and assume, as this author does, that animal instincts are perfectly designed downloads of survival information from a super wisdom, what about us?
That is the big question.
If the bee has its sacred geometry and the chick has its flawless escape plan, what is the human equivalent? What are the innate instincts that humans possess, entirely independent of culture, independent of our parents' teaching, independent of society?
What is our pre-programmed software?
Exactly. And if we can identify those fundamental, untaught human instincts, what might those specific traits suggest about the nature of our own fundamental design? Are we programmed purely for survival, for social connection? Or perhaps are we instinctively programmed to try and uncover the very super wisdom that this text is talking about?
That is a staggering thought to end on. What is the human equivalent of the 109.28-degree angle? If you want to dig into this perspective and read the other 38 pieces of evidence, the text is There is a Supernatural Soul in the Universe by Feng. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this exploration gave you some incredible aha moments and a completely new lens for looking at the bees in your garden or the eggs in your fridge. Keep exploring, keep challenging your perspectives, and keep questioning the world around you.